All right, let's get into today's top story. We're going to talk about Ukraine. It's one day before Americans cast their vote to decide whether or not they're going to throw out these warmongers in Congress. These are the people pushing for nuclear war, by the way. I mean, a number of members of Congress actively pushing for nuclear war. Remember, just about every member of Congress has voted to continuously send money and weapons to Ukraine.
Now, as I was researching the story we're going to do later about Google, I was just sort of searching around for like which members of Congress promote peace. And those are not search results you're supposed to see. It's like these people support bombs all across the board, pretty much across the board. There's very few candidates that you can check that promote peace. So,
we got like 24 hours, of course, till voting starts. We're already being told, of course, it's going to be many days until we get results, right? Because, Pennsylvania could be 8 days, and now we're turning into a third world country suddenly. It's amazing in 2022, we've reverted to like 17th century vote tallying suddenly in the United States. Anyway, overnight, the head of the U.S. Nuclear Command says that the big one is coming. Those are his words. The big one is coming. Actual nuclear attacks are coming. The Navy Admiral Charles Richard says, quote, this Ukraine crisis that we're in right now is just the warm-up act. And he basically says, and he's the head of the U.S. Strategic Command, he says the big one is coming, and it's going to be very long before we're going to get tested in ways that we haven't been tested in a long time. And it isn't going to be very long before we're going to get tested in ways that we haven't been tested in a long time. And specifically, he's talking about the new U.S. Nuclear Posture Review, also known as NPR. Isn't that funny that it's also known as NPR?
Yeah.
National Public Radio.
Also, when you say the big one, because I'm from the Bay Area, we usually say the big one is the next big earthquake.
The next big earthquake.
That's what we mean. I'm much more comfortable with that than this version of the big one.
Yeah. Isn't it sad that you're more excited? Like, oh, that's better. So an 8.1 earthquake is better than...
Californians are used to anticipating earthquakes, and we prepare for it. There is less you can do about preparing for nuclear fallout.
So specifically, he's talking about this Nuclear Posture Review, NPR, which changes our position effectively and allows the United States a first strike using nuclear weapons if all else fails. So that's good news. According to antiwar.com, the review says that the purpose of the U.S. nuclear arsenal is to deter strategic attacks, assure allies and partners, and achieve U.S. objectives if deterrence fails. So basically, it would consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the United States or its allies and partners. So basically, hey, if all of our crappy weapons that have heretofore been proving themselves to be junkers, if those don't work, well, we're just going to have to rely on our nuclear arsenal. So, okay, guys, buckle up. Because at that stage, we'll know that those things work, and maybe they won't work because they're so old and they haven't been updated, which is another big part of this thing, which is they want to spend $1.5 trillion to update and modernize our nuclear triad. So $1.5 trillion. So we can spend $800 billion a year on a U.S. military budget, but apparently all of our stuff is junky and has been sitting there collecting dust and doesn't work, as it's been proven. We're seeing this on the battlefield in Ukraine. How many of these things are being destroyed because they're just not working? And now we need to spend $1.5 trillion to update our nuclear arsenal while people suffer. They can't pay gas. Their rents are going up. They can't find food. So let's spend $1.5 trillion to update our nuclear arsenal.
And how do you test that, I wonder?
You test it on China. That's literally part of this. Because he says the National Defense Strategy names China as the most comprehensive and serious challenge. So he basically says Russia's just an acute threat. They're just a minor pinprick. China's the real issue here. I
mean, we've talked about many times how the bombs that were dropped on Japan, I think it was between 5 and 15%, actually succeeded in detonating. It was like 85% fail rate.
And a mile away from the target.
But there's really, you can only test this in bits and pieces. I lack a fundamental understanding of military weaponry, but you have to think that we really won't know until we know.
Right. So let's give it a try. Let's see how many people are vaporized as a result of us testing out our nuclear weapons. China responded to this and issued this. It said, look, again, nuclear wars must not be fought, according to Xi Jinping, because this is like in response to what the U.S. is saying about this new nuclear posture. Like, the United States keeps wanting to deploy these nuclear weapons now to Europe. No, we can't do that. So, no, don't do that. Meanwhile, there's no end.
Well, and how bad does it make the U.S. look that we're sitting here actually talking pro-nuclear war when these other countries are like, no, we need to put the brakes on this. Like, these are the countries that we're like, these are the enemy. They're bad players, and they're the ones talking common sense.
Yeah, it really is striking. And of course, the United States is the only one to ever use nuclear weapons. So maybe not so striking. But we're seeing, we keep hoping on this channel. We look for all angles of peace. One of my favorite websites in the world is called antiwar.com. I read it every day. So we are vehemently anti-war. We are vehemently pro-peace. And yet there doesn't seem to be an appetite for it at all.
No, if you talk peace, you are a Russian propagandist.
You're a bot.
Period.
You're a
yes.
bot.
Anytime you talk anything about peace, it's you're pro-Russia.
Yeah.
And we've just been watching that on social media, and anything you don't like must be Russian, can't entertain it.
It's really disgusting because there doesn't seem to be an end in sight for this war. Overnight, Ukraine, backed by NATO forces, rained hell down on the people of Donetsk using American HIMARS, heavy artillery weapons. According to these reports, these were HIMARS attacks. This is the Donetsk railway station, totally destroyed. It happened in the early morning hours. This is in central Donetsk. Remember, this is now Russian sovereign territory, regardless of where you come down politically. It doesn't really matter at this point. Like they voted overwhelmingly to become part of Russia.
They have documents.
They are now Russian.
Pensions, right.
Yes, they have passports. This is Russian territory. Destroyed by NATO forces. So make no mistake about it, guys. This is World War III. I mean, you're looking at these images. Don't they just harken back to seeing the Blitz on the Blitz of Britain, like burning buildings? Like, this is what this looks like.
It's awful.
This is World War III.
I'm just waiting for the white hats to come in and start, helping clear people out.
The propagandists to arrive, the white hats?
Yeah, the white hats.
These attacks, by the way, have been going on for 9 years. Tens of thousands of people have lost their lives. And the Western media continues to hide this story actively. You try searching for it. It's hard to find. They continually hide the truth, and they try to blame it on Russia. I sat down with Wyatt Reed. He's an American journalist who just visited the Donbas. He was there. His hotel was targeted by NATO-backed Ukrainian forces just after he arrived. He had just checked in, and he went out to do some on-the-ground journalism, and his hotel was attacked. I asked him, what exactly is happening in this area? Here's what Wyatt told me.
Zelensky and his government was basically within 2 hours of getting to Donetsk. My hotel is shelled by artillery, I believe a 155 millimeter artillery shell. It's a NATO standard shell, either coming from a French or a British howitzer. So that is, I got immediately just a small taste of what it's like to live there. Just watched my hotel being hit about 100 meters away from me. I just saw this huge firework kind of explode in front of me. And that was, I was told out afterwards by some of the other people who survived, we're kind of relaxing afterwards, having a drink in this blown up hotel bar. And they said, well, that was your baptism by fire. You survived. Congratulations. Welcome to Donetsk.
Okay.
That's your welcome. That's your welcome, Matt.
And this is the region that Ukraine is so-called saving, right? We're trying to get them back by destroying them.
Well, and this is what we're, of course, being told, right? That this is all propaganda and that this is Russia attacking their own people in Donetsk. Think about that for a second. That's like, I don't know how to describe that. Again, that would be like New York attacking New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And what Wyatt told me, we were talking after, and he said, I learned when I was there just to walk on the western side of the street, because we all know where the shells are coming from. They're coming from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So when you walk along the street in the Donbas, or in Donetsk specifically, you're making sure you're shielded, because by the building. So if the shells come from the west, they're hitting the top of the building, and then the building is absorbing the blow, and it's going to fall into the other side of the street, the eastern side of the street, and you'll be protected, at least in part. He's like, this is how you get to think about when you walk, and this is what people have been living with for 9 years in this area. 9 years. So there's no appetite, it seems like, for peace.
Well, and what's infuriating also is that you don't see CNN, you don't see Fox, you don't see MSNBC. They don't have reporters over there. And these guys are putting their lives on the line to bring us news. And they're marginalized. They're called Russian apologists, like on Twitter and stuff. Mm-hmm. These guys are destroyed literally every day by the mainstream media, who is not there at all.
No, and sadly, Wyatt told me, he said, if I was killed there, he said, they would just get no coverage at all. And they would run some kind of story that says like Russian, pro-Russian journalist or something like that killed, and they would not investigate it and would not be reported at all.
Oh, right, Russian propaganda.
Celebrate it in a way.
Oh,
I'm sure some people would celebrate it on Twitter. I guarantee it.
Of course.
Well, who was the lady that had like tweeted out something about like, too bad that Wyatt wasn't in the hotel when it blew up?
Yeah, I asked him about this. We're going to see a full in-depth interview with Wyatt a little bit later this week. But he specifically talked about that Democratic member of Congress. I think she's running for Congress from Illinois, who tweeted after he talked about his hotel being blown up. He said, if I had been there a minute earlier, I would have been killed. And she tweeted something like, "Oh, I wish you would have been there a minute earlier." This is a Democratic member of Congress, or running for Congress. Then there was no one said anything about it. No one, and she only deleted the tweet. But there's no news coverage of it. Where's NBC News covering the horror? No,
that's somebody wishing someone else extreme harm.
Yeah.
And that person's running for Congress.
Can you believe that?
No.
We're living in really troubling times. So there's some really interesting developments over the past 48 hours that I want to call our attention to. And the Western media seems to be carrying out some kind of new strategy, because they're all working together. The Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times. I'm always skeptical. As soon as all of these guys come together within almost like 24 hours and they start releasing trickle of this garbage news, it's coming right from the intelligence state. It's coming right from somebody's playbook. We're too smart for that now. Don't fall for it. So what are they saying? There's a lot of talk that the United States and Ukraine are trying to come up with a plan for peace. Okay. But you need to read between the lines on this. So the way that the Washington Post reports the story is that the U.S. is telling Ukraine to basically act like you want peace, but you don't actually want peace. So that people will continue to send you weapons and money. Sounds like a great idea, right? And it's exactly what the United States is doing, and Ukraine right now, according to the Washington Post. So the Washington Post this weekend reported that the United States wants Ukraine to signal peace, right, with Russia, but to not actually begin peace talks.
This is the stupidest thing. I read this morning and was like, but other people can read this too.
Like, you actually pressed publish on this?
Right. And so we're supposed to make other people think that you might have peace talks so that other nations continue to send weapons and aids.
Yeah.
But they can read it too. And so can Russia. And so Russia's not going to be fooled by any faux invitation to a peace talk. What do they think? That you can invite them to a peace talk and then you don't show up, like ghosting a date?
Right.
That's ridiculous. Like, sorry, Putin left you at the altar.
Where's Zelensky? He was supposed to be. Where's Zelensky? Is he getting a new green T-shirt? Where is he? He's supposed to be here tonight. Maybe he's hanging out with Ben Stiller. So, basically, to put it another way, just pretend that you want peace, right? Act like you want peace, so then you can go on and continue asking for money and weapons. Like, no, I really want peace, but in the meantime, please continue to send me weapons and money. That's the strategy here.
Now, recall that Ukrainian President Zelensky signed a law forbidding peace talks in Ukraine, which at the time I wondered, why would he forbid himself from leading something that why wouldn't he just leave the door open? Is it because he thinks maybe his predecessor might do something, but his predecessor would have the same right to repeal a law like that if by some miracle there was someone who was peace-loving who became his predecessor? Who knows? It's such foolery.
It is. So the article says the request by American officials is not aimed at pushing Ukraine to the negotiating table, these people said. Rather, they call it a calculated attempt to ensure the government in Kiev maintains the support of other nations facing constituencies wary of fueling a war for many years to come. So it's not about peace at all. It's literally about duping other governments.
Well, because if you're a warmonger, you have to act like you're not. Like any other predator.
Right.
Can't go around acting like a predator, right? This is what my dad calls Eddie Haskell behavior. Do you know what that means?
No, I don't.
It's from Leave It to Beaver.
I know, I get it, but
it's like the guy who's so manipulative. He's like wheeling and dealing, but he acts like a nice guy when he's around the parents. All right, that's a dated one. That is a dated one. That's a good old reference. But my dad uses it a lot. Even still.
I'll get that one. I get that one.
Okay.
So glad you got that. So, I mean, it's amazing. And they're saying the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, I mean, are getting involved together in this apparent propaganda because it wasn't just the Washington Post. Almost to the day, on the same day, it was the day. The Wall Street Journal coming right out with a similar report at the same time. So something is clearly fishy here. And we are too smart. You guys are too smart who watch the show to fall for this crap. Like you're sitting back there reading the Wall Street Journal like, this is interesting. I saw a similar story earlier this morning in the Washington Post. It must be coming from the intelligence state. Here's the Wall Street Journal story. Top White House officials holding undisclosed talks with Russia. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has reportedly been trying to avert an escalation over Ukraine. Oh, so Americans really want peace. Oh, okay. So they're actively working towards peace, but in the meantime, let's continue to send them weapons and money. That's the message. So here's Jake Sullivan, citing sources according to the piece. According to U.S. and allied officials interviewed by the newspaper, Sullivan has been in touch with Yuri Ushakov, a foreign policy aide to Russian President Putin, and with Nikolai Pastrushev, who heads Russia's Security Council. The aim of the talks has been to, quote, guard against the risk of escalation and keep communication channels open, rather than to discuss a peace settlement for the Ukraine conflict, officials told the Wall Street Journal. This is literally the game plan. No peace, but we have channels open. Who the hell cares? It's like, what, a hurrah on Star Trek? Like open a frequency or hurrah? Like,
but don't get on it and don't do anything.
Don't do anything. Don't negotiate with the Klingons. Just open a channel. It's garbage. And then on top of it, the Wall Street Journal, this is my favorite line from this Wall Street Journal piece. It says, the Wall Street Journal sources refused to provide details on when the negotiations took place or where they were productive.
Or whether
they were productive. So, again, it's total garbage. They won't tell us where they took place or if they were productive. If they were productive, they would have talked about it.
Well, of course they were productive because Ukraine is doing anything the United States says.
I don't think these talks happened at all. And if they did, the Russians would talk about it on their side as well. There would be, I mean, I don't buy this at all.
Yeah.
I mean, at the same time, the Wall Street Journal puts out a piece saying the U.S. has no choice but to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. That's another piece they put out. So here, on almost the same day.
Yes, they do have a choice. There is a choice. Look at us right now choosing not to help in Yemen or Syria. Like, we're doing that.
Or to invade Haiti. We're actively invading Haiti right now. We have a choice whether or not we want to.
From the very beginning, I've been asking myself, like, we have sent Ukraine more than Russia's whole entire budget for a year. So if that's the case, how do they still need more? Do you know what I mean? Does that make any sense? Like, we've sent them Russia's entire budget, more than that.
Oh,
more than
Russia's entire
annual budget.
Like military budget?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
More than Russia's annual military budget we have now sent to Ukraine.
The whole country. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, because
that's a staggering number.
If you think about it, only 10% of that money is going anywhere. I mean, it's we don't even know where it's going. So no wonder we have to keep sending more of it because, it's like you're just filling up a cup and it's just spilling over to the sides because no one knows where it's going. It's going to the black market. It's not being accounted for. So that's why it seems interesting, this next part of the story here. Instead, again, the Wall Street Journal says they're more interested in spending money and they don't know what they can do about it, so they're just going to stand by. The Pentagon says that they plan to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And they're setting up a whole new command post for Ukraine based in Germany. So Ukraine operations for NATO, from the Pentagon and NATO, now being set up in Germany. Here's as long as it takes. Sabrina Singh, the Deputy Foreign Press Secretary for the Pentagon, told reporters the new command center will ensure we are postured to continue supporting Ukraine over the long term. She added the U.S. remains committed to Ukraine for as long as it takes. No, this will be to oversee the distribution of weapons to someone inside of Ukraine. It's all very fishy. I want to talk about the mercenaries here in Ukraine. Ukraine's army is almost destroyed. NATO is now relying on foreign mercenaries to fill in the ranks, including Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters, as we've reported here on the show, fighters from Poland, the UK, United States. And it's all very interesting that the United States is sending a one-star general to Ukraine to oversee everything. Why a one-star? This is the very question that Colonel Douglas McGregor was asked, was talking about with me just a short time ago. He says the whole thing smells dirty. Listen to the colonel.
You have this strange announcement that we're suddenly sending, after 8 months of no accountability, a few hundred soldiers under a brigadier general into Ukraine with the mission of somehow or another tracking all of the equipment that's being sent. Well, we already know that large quantities of the equipment are being sold off to others around the world, including ISIS. What is this really all about? I mean, we've been at this for 8 months. We've spent $65 billion, and now suddenly we're worried about accountability. This is beginning to look a little like an advance party for this very dangerous proposition that a multinational coalition of the willing, a force of perhaps 50, 60, 70, 80,000 Western troops, will eventually go into Western Ukraine.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So a one-star general being used for this? And now Lloyd Austin saying that we're about to send the best of the best weapons to Ukraine. So what we've currently sent apparently hasn't been working. That's been tested and died on the battlefield. And now we're ramping up and sending advanced air defense systems next month. So the Pentagon, wants to get these advanced air defense systems by early next month. And they need these surface-to-air missiles. That's their goal. Because they know what's coming. They know what's coming in a few weeks as the ground freezes and Russia launches this massive invasion. So Putin, sitting back, he's doing these speeches, he's watching this. He's watching Donetsk get hit and shelled, and it's been ramped up over the past number of months. It's gotten worse, of course, as we talked about over the past few days. And that hell on earth is about to be unleashed. And it's going to happen.
I mean, it looks like it already was. Those images are shocking.
So we're just all watching it very closely. And of course, we've got the midterm elections tomorrow in the United States. So we'll see if much, if anything, changes in the next 48 hours, 24 hours in the United States. But there could be some major changes coming. We'll see.
Yes, peace is not on the ballot.
Clarify?
Go ahead.
I just want to clarify, too, the budget that I talked about. In September of 2022, the entire Russian defense budget for the year was adjusted to 4.7 trillion rubles, which is $77.7 billion. So that's their entire annual, just for the people that were asking in chat.
So we've said 80 billion, roughly. The estimates are even more than that. But 80, if we want to go with just their numbers, it's about $80 billion we've so far sent to Ukraine. So yes,
right, in 8 months. Compared to 12 months of $77 billion for Russia.
Wow.
Yeah. So, again, where does all that money go? Where do all those weapons go?
I mean, that sounds like a winning number. You'd think it'd be over and done by now. But you're not really paying attention if you think that is actually money that's going to something.
George W. Bush lost $10 billion in Iraq. Remember when $10 billion or $11 billion just vanished? They were like, we can't find it. We don't know where it is.
But the thing, that's $77 billion to defend Russia for an entire year. They've got that in 8 months, and they can't. They say they can't hold them back.
Right.
That just makes 0 sense.
Right. So they've literally lost 20% of their country, 15 to 20% of their country now under Russian control, and almost the entire Ukrainian army is destroyed. So what do you get for $80 billion? Now you get mercenaries. and you get people from Poland. You get ISIS and Al Qaeda fighters pouring into this country. And of course, we said it would end up being till the last Ukrainian. That's what's going to happen here unless they push for peace, because it's going to be wiped off the map unless they do something. We've been saying this from day one.